Hello, welcome back to my channel and to today's video where I'll be sharing my latest winter and Christmas home refresh. This year I started in the lounge and with one of the main pieces of Christmas decor in this room, the fireplace garland. Now, over the last few years, I've collected a few different garlands, and this year I wanted to really layer them up and have something quite simple, but also thick and bushy. So starting with the first garland, I just laid this on top of our mantel beam and fiddled about with the foliage until it looked a little bit fuller because they do get a bit squashed when they're in storage for the rest of the year. Then I layered another two on top of that to get that thicker and bushier look. I've used these little command hooks in previous years and they've always done the job, so I used them again this time. I stuck 4 in total to the beam, and then with the 4th garland I draped that, leaving a little tail at one side. And because of this tail, this particular garland wasn't quite long enough to repeat the same drape on the other side, so I just repeated this with a 5th garland on that other side, again with a draping tail. And here you can see how all of those garlands look all layered up. Now there were a few gaps, so I decided to use some of my faux stems to fill in those gaps and to give the look just a little bit more detail without being too fussy. Because there were so many garlands all stacked one on top of each other, the stems were actually quite easy to just weave in and out, and this kept them nice and secure and in place. I used 6 stems in total, and as you can see, they're quite subtle. I actually wanted more of a natural sort of wintry look rather than something overtly Christmas. And I'm really happy with how this turned out. I just had one last little fiddle with the various bits of foliage just to fill in any visible gaps. And then because it is Christmas, I did decide to add some lights. These are just a 5-meter set of warm white battery operated lights. They can be used indoors or outdoors, and they also have a built-in timer, so I switch them on at 5 p.m. and they now stay on for 6 hours before automatically turning off for 18 hours. I've kept them on the steady option, but there's lots of different options like twinkle, slow fade, chasing, all the usuals. I then added a foliage wreath to the canvas above the mantle. We've had this wreath for a few years now and I like it because it's very simple, just foliage and some little pine cone details. So once again, it looks very natural. Next, I moved on to the cushions on the sofa. These are something that I do change and swap out each season. It's a small but very effective change. And once you've got the cushion covers for each season, they don't take much space at all to store them. Now, I love changing things around, so I like to have a collection of different covers that I can mix and match and use all throughout the house. Textures like velvet are perfect for both autumn and winter seasons because they have a really cozy feel to them, literally. And then I'm mixing up my prints by having one checked and one floral. Now, I have to admit, it's taken me a while to embrace the whole non-matching cushions thing, but I made it in the end, and now that I'm here, I love it. Now, I know you guys know the drill by now, but for anyone who may be new here, I'll just mention that everything you see in today's video will be listed in the description box below. If by any chance there's anything missing, then just drop me a comment and I'll get back to you ASAP. I didn't do much with the coffee table back when I did my autumn refresh, so I wanted to add a little bit more detail for winter and the festive season by layering, which is another way to make a room look and feel more cozy. Now, I may make this look easy, but in reality, I played about with this coffee table for a good couple of hours before I actually settled on something that I really liked the look of. I've got quite a big collection of books that I use for reference, but they're also really handy for styling, hence why they're often referred to as coffee table books, which is quite apt here. I've stacked several of these books into piles and then added a rustic vase and a large bell jar scented candle. I'm really happy with this turned out, although I must admit coffee table styling isn't my strong point, but books are definitely helping me get there, and I'm starting to pick up more tips as I go along. Next up was the shelves in the alcove next to the fireplace, and again I didn't change much in my last refresh aside from a little bit of seasonal decor, but this time I wanted to completely restyle them for winter, so I stripped all the shelves bare, gave them a good clean and started from scratch. Once more, what you're seeing here is not my first attempt by any means. I stood and procrastinated over these shelves for hours, doing a lot of fiddling, obviously, until I decided on my final setup. So I used more books, stacking and layering them, and I added a mix of both new, and by new I mean modern day, pieces, along with some antiques. You may also notice that I added some empty frames, and I'll get onto those a little bit later because I do have a little DIY project to share with you all towards the end of the video, but here they're just being used empty so that I could finish the styling. When it comes to Christmas trees, we've usually gone for a real tree. However, each year they're really jumping up in price, and whilst we both love a real tree, the smell, the look, they do come with some pitfalls. The needles and the endless hoovering. You have to remember to top up the water, and then there's the bugs. So this year we did finally decide to buy an artificial tree, and one that was pre-lit because lights are probably my least favourite thing to put on, and then even worse, take off of a Christmas tree. So this particular tree came in 3 parts and then also the base. It was so easy to put together, and the lights didn't even need to be connected. The poles actually slotting into each other are the connectors. This for me was mind-blowing. And in comparison to previous years, this took me a mere fraction of the time to put up and have fully lit. There did need to be quite a lot of fiddling, of course, with the branches to get them looking bushy after coming out of the box. But to be honest with you, I will take that. Now, I do need to find a new tree skirt because the one that we already had doesn't fit this size of base because it's quite large. So that's a task for me over the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, I might even be able to get one in the sale. And then finally, one last cozy touch in the lounge, and that was a couple of checked throw blankets, which I draped over the back of these 2 teddy chairs. We've obviously got a fire in here, so it's unlikely the blankets would ever need to be used as such, but it just creates a more layered look. Next, I moved on to the entrance area where we have this console table that I usually restyle each season. I didn't actually change much here, I just swapped out a couple of details and, yep, you guessed it, had a bit of a fiddle with what I already had here. So one thing I did swap out was the vase, and I brought in this wicker sort of urn style vase instead, which I then added some preserved eucalyptus. Now, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but parvifolia? Eucalyptus parvifolia, which have been dyed in this really deep green. So again, not overtly Christmassy, but they do feel appropriate for the time of year. And when Christmas is over and I come to de-Christmas the house before the start of the new year, this saves me having to do another swap because it's more of a winter theme rather than specifically Christmas. As you can see, there's another frame in there, and as I've mentioned, I'll be talking prints and frames and mounts towards the end of the video. On to day 2 now, and I was in the kitchen ready to tackle that space with a cup of tea, of course. And first of all was the long shelf that we have over the sink area. As I did with the lounge shelves, I stripped this bare and gave it a good clean. Whilst we do clean areas like this more frequently than just once a season, doing my seasonal refreshers is a good excuse to have a good old clean. Now, I didn't do this last year, but I did do it the year before, and that is to add garlands, albeit the year before they were slightly different garlands. I used the little sticky command hooks again and placed about 7 along the length of the shelf. I have 2 long 9-foot cedar garlands which stretch the length of this shelf, so I twisted those together to create a fuller look. I then used cable ties to attach the garlands to the command hooks, so just creating a loose loop with each tie so that there was enough length to slot into each hook and get a little bit of drape. I then had 2 smaller and darker cedar garlands which I layered over the top, again just to thicken the overall appearance and to create a more natural look with varying green tones. Once I was happy with the garland, I started to style pieces back on the shelf. I used some of the items that I'd already taken off, but then added some additional pieces, including frames, which will also feature in the segment at the end of the video. I swapped a few bits around on the countertop as well, starting off with this corner. I usually try and disguise this plug socket by covering with something like a serving board, but this year I swapped that over to the other side of the sink and instead added this mini Christmas tree so that we have just a little hint of Christmas in the kitchen. On the other side, along with the lamp and the round serving board, I added a metal bookstand and a cookbook, which just disguises the speaker, some wires, and the Alexa that we have hidden back there. This vase and simple but very voluminous autumn arrangement has been one of my favourites. So I was a little bit sad to say goodbye to this until next autumn, but I did want to freshen it up for the new season. I decided to opt for a mix of green stems that I actually used last winter, and I really love the combination. So there's some artificial hop stems in there along with some textured green leafy stems. Once the kitchen was done, I moved on to our TV living area and started to recreate the floating garland that I did last year. We spend most of our evening time in this space whilst we're watching telly, so it's always nice to have a little hint of Christmas given that our tree is in the more formal living area in the lounge. I used a tension pole. It's much thicker than a rod because these garlands are quite heavy. I think it was actually advertised as a tension shower curtain pole, but it works perfectly for this. Using cable ties, I attached each garland to one half of the pole, and you'll notice that I started with the pole lower down in front of the TV so that it was more of a reasonable height for me to fiddle about with without me having to stand on a chair or stretch. I had 2 other garlands spare, so I decided to layer those in as well, weaving them in and out of the foliage of the larger garlands. With each garland tied securely to the pole, I could then loosen the tension and raise the pole into its final position above the TV. All of the foliage is wired, so it's very easy to manipulate so that I can fill in any gaps and get it looking nice and even. Last year I didn't add any lights, but I did add ribbon and bells. This year I've left the ribbon and bells out, but I did decide to add some battery-operated fairy lights, which I weaved in and out of the foliage. These are the same lights that I used on the garland over on the mantle, so they will come on automatically at 5 p.m. each evening for 6 hours. I did decide to add another mini Christmas tree to one of our side tables. I had this little one from last year and it was perfect for this round table. The large coffee table was next, and because it's a rustic reclaimed wood, it has a lot of texture to it, which unfortunately traps dust and inevitably dog hair. So I use this little brush car attachment to hoover the surface each time that I clean it, because you can't just dust it with a cloth. Then, with a clean and blank table to work with, I started the restyle. Now, I did cheat a little bit because I actually used the same formula, if we're going to call it that, as I did in the lounge. So that's 3 different stacks of books, a medium-sized vase, although I'm leaving this one empty, and then a large scented candle. I did a slight change of the cushion covers on the sofa and swapped out these caramel velvet covers for some darker vintage style floral ones. The last area to get a Christmas refresh was our front door. First, I needed to remove the wicker style pumpkins and put those away for another year, making sure there was no creepy crawlies living inside. I also removed the doormat that we had there for the autumn season before adding some lights to the trees that we have either side of the door. You may remember that I bought these trees just before I did the autumn refresh, and to be honest with you, I am still loving them. They were such a good decision, and now they even look great with Christmas lights. I gave a quick blast with the leaf blower to create a clear space for the new doormat, but those leaves were back within seconds because at this time of year, getting rid of leaves is an endless task. I decided to stick with the same wreath that I had out for autumn because it's really beautiful and it's pre-lit, so completely faff-free. All of the lights out here will come on at the same time and then automatically shut off throughout the day. Right, okay, so as I've been promising throughout this video, this final segment is all about frames and prints and mounts. I mentioned in previous home refresh videos that this is such a cost-effective and easy way of changing up seasonal decor. To add to that today, I'm going to share how to elevate your mounts by covering them in fabric with a little DIY. So you'll need your mounts, your chosen fabric, some scissors, and some spray adhesive. I had some scraps of fabric, so I just decided to use those for these mounts, and you'll want to give your mount a minimum of about 1 centimetre overlap on all edges. Once the fabric is cut to size, then it's really best practice to iron it so that it's completely smooth and crease free. The next step is to spray your mount with the spray adhesive. If you have a pre-made mount, then remember to spray the top side, which is often beveled. This is the side that will be stuck to the fabric, and that will be the facing side. With this particular spray adhesive, I use it for about a minute or so that the glue isn't wet. It's tacky. If you put fresh wet glue onto your fabric, it may seep through and leave stains, and then you'll have to remove it and start from scratch. Once your glue is tacky, you'll want to carefully lay that onto the back side of your fabric so that the front side of the fabric is on the outside or the face of the mount. Using a pair of scissors, pierce a hole in the centre piece of fabric and cut the same size overlap on the inner sides of the mount. In each of the corners, make a diagonal cut to create flaps on the inner sides. Using the spray adhesive again, cover the back of your mount, but try to be careful when getting it on the fabric because you don't want to be too liberal and have it bleed onto the front facing side of your fabric because again, this could stain. Leave that another minute to go tacky again and then fold each of the overlapping edges of fabric over and stick to the back side of the mount. In the corners, you can make a diagonal cut to remove some of that excess fabric that's been overlapped. Once your mount is finished, I would recommend leaving it to one side to fully dry for a couple of hours or so, and then you're all set to add your prints. So I buy my prints in digital format from Etsy. I have a few favourite sellers and I will list those down below in the description box. Price-wise, they're usually about £2 to £3, although most sellers offer bulk discount, and they come in various different size resolutions once you purchase one print. So then you can choose how you want to have them printed, the size, etc. I usually have mine printed by Vistaprint, especially any larger prints, and I opt for the poster print option on matte paper. You could, however, also print smaller A4 or less sized prints at home if you've got a decent printer. And one extra little touch is that you can use textured paper or card to get more of an antique-y art look. I store my seasonal prints inside my frames so that they remain flat, and then with each seasonal change I can swap out one print for another that's already inside the frame, so there's no need to find a storage space for them. Once you've got the prints, that's it. You're all set. You can swap them out as and when you please. And if, like me, you're not into a lot of full-on Christmas-themed decor, some little prints like this are a great way to add a festive touch to your home, and they take minimal time and effort. And there we go, guys. We're all set for the winter season and for Christmas. Join me again at the end of December when I will film taking down our Christmas decorations, see how and where I store them, and watch me get our home ready for a fresh new year. But for now, that's it from me. Thank you as always for watching. Happy holidays, and I'll see you next time.